So again, I hope you had a wonderful lunch. There's still coffee and a lot of sugary material that's available for your consumption. So I've been told that any sugar you eat here or any calories you eat here burn by the time you leave the room. So I don't know. We haven't tested that hypothesis, but we could always have you try. So we have a wonderful session this afternoon. I'm going to give you a brief update on various things that we've been doing at the center. Then we have two speakers. Following that, we're going to be given this is a conference on business continuity. If anybody gets delayed, we have a fallback plan. So everything is good, and our speakers have been incredibly cooperative in helping us keeping this thing moving. Part of my goal here is to give you a sense of various projects that are happening at the center, to give you an idea of things that are going on, and also to basically answer the question, what do the students do during the rest of the year when you're not running a conference? So hopefully this will give you an answer. So again, my name is Ananthlyer, and part of what I have the pleasure of doing is reporting on the summary of things happening here. And the goal of doing this, for all of you who are involved in representing industry, to think of this as an opportunity for you to think of projects you may have that our students can be engaged in. Our main goal here as a center is to create opportunities for our students to learn, and the kind of opportunities we are creating is opportunities in which there's a business problem. They get guidance from us as faculty, as well as from staff, such as Steve, and friends of the center. Some of you have met Angus, you have mentioned Roy. These are all people who've been helping us, and various faculty, and many of our Cranard faculty are in the audience, and they all play a role in helping the students learn, getting this to happen. So again, there are three of us at the center. Heidi, who Steve introduced and who was in the front, who's helping coordinate all of this. Steve Dunlop, who started off the conference and introduced everybody, and myself. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the projects. You heard from Sergio today, and Sergio is going to be around to help judge the case competitions. This is a project which, in some sense, if I ever were to think of Exhibit A for resilience or seizing an opportunity, it is this project. So I'll give you a little historical background regarding how this project came to be and what we're doing with it. Last year, I was on sabbatical. I was on sabbatical at the Wharton School, and in March, we got this email saying, hey, there's an opportunity to do this project, and so we have to be on a call on Thursday. So Thursday morning, but due to some mix-up, Steve couldn't be on the call. So I was on the call, Sergio was at the other end, and a few other people. And the call went on for about 2 to 3 hours. And the idea was, okay, write it up and give us a proposal. And that happened Friday. I said, okay, submit a full proposal. When is it due? 5 p.m. Monday. And why does it have to be 5 p.m. Monday? Because you get one shot on Tuesday for this to be approved in Brussels. And if it's not approved, you lost the project. Okay. Now, of course, those of you who know, Sergio, I was talking about you. So those of you who know that we sit in a university, and this is like making elephants dance, right? So this is not an easy thing to do. It's possible, I think it's done in circuses, but it's not easy to do. So what is interesting is that somehow between Thursday and Friday and the weekend and Monday, it all happened. And thanks to support from people like Sergio at the other end in Europe, Tuesday, we get approval for this project. So that's the project we've been focused on. And I mentioned briefly detergent pods. As Sergio said, please don't eat them, because it's after you eat that you use them to wash your clothes. But what has been wonderful is this is a project that's actually within the European Union. It's mainly, one of the main roles is with the customs area in Europe, and it's to facilitate trade flows for multinationals. Right? And this has actually provided an amazing opportunity for many people to play a role. I must recognize two other faculty. Olga Senisheva is one of our faculty in operations. So is Gemma, who was here during lunch. So we are the faculty who've been working with the students. I haven't listed the student team because it's a very large team of students that's always flexing based on whatever deadlines we have. We don't want Sergio to know that it's all the paddling that happens at this end every time there's a conference call to get everything ready so we can answer all his questions. But there are three sort of very interesting general themes which has really allowed us to learn a lot. One is called synchronization. And just from a definitional perspective, it's to try to sync up the demand side and the plant production. And remember that this is easier said than done because this is synchronization given all of the product variety, and it's really synchronization of production at the SKU level to try to sync up what's manufactured and what's consumed. And given all the variability of consumption, you can see that it would be a very interesting challenge. All of us think of Europe as one entity, and then we realize that it's full of individual countries with their own preferences and their brand choices and color choices and all of those things. So it makes for a very, very interesting project. One of the things that's been particularly helpful, remember all of us as faculty wear different hats. I mean, we have a research interest, we have a teaching interest, we want to do all kinds of different things. And most of us, when we think about supply chain management, and you sit on our side, which is on the academic side, we're not privy to the details of the complexity till somebody shares data with us, okay? And we on the operations side always envious of our colleagues in finance who, without leaving their chairs, click a button and the data shows up on tick by tick, stock movement, etc. So literally, you don't even need to move and the data comes to you. Very few other disciplines have that feature. The marketing guys have also stopped moving because point of sale data comes in. And then we looked at our MIS guys and they get all this web traffic data. So we look around and we say, the most fit people are the operations people because we are running around to gather data. Well, the rest of the people are just sitting in the offices getting data fed to them. Well, this is one of those cases where thanks to some incredible effort on the P&G side, they've actually given us a tremendous amount of detail of the it's almost as if on every manufacturing line, every minute, what is happening for the entire year, that level of detail. And I just want to say that, if you have that kind of data and you're saying who's interested in that data, there's an entire army of professors at this end interested in that data. And if you would ask, what do you learn from it? We learn a lot from it. We learn a lot about the ebbs and flows of business, of the variability in demand, of delays regarding delivery. And all of those make it more and more interesting. And it becomes even more interesting because you can almost think of this as getting closer and closer to sort of real-time monitoring and decision-making. That doesn't mean you need to run it that way, but it allows you to sort of think about that. So our students have been doing a variety of things. They've been looking at the data both statistically, through simulation models. If things work out right, we're even hoping that the plant will run a schedule that we generate to try to see how their synchronization will improve. And so that's the kind of opportunity that we're seeing. And one of the things that's wonderful is that this kind of data detail is potentially going to be available for us for every plant throughout the world that they have in a particular category. So that's synchronization. The topic of today's discussion was business continuity. And business continuity is real for companies, particularly, and it becomes more and more real the more you want to be a lean supply chain. If you're a lean supply chain, you cannot tolerate disruptions. So you have to plan for it. And how you plan for it, given that you have a global network of plants, makes it a very interesting proposition. And we're learning the kinds of things that are of interest there. Sometimes you see some sort of, my sort of approach is, if I see something, my next question is, so why is it that way, right? And understanding why this takes 5 weeks, or why this is 4 weeks of inventory, or why you have this much capacity, is a good starting question. And the answer to that question, is something that we're seeing a lot of variety on the business continuity side. The third, which is something, again, one thinks of the word visibility, and you think that visibility is one thing, but it's not. You could have continuous visibility, you could have windows, you could have updates, and all kinds of things. And the difference between every one of these things is a cost. So if, in fact, demand is stable, deliveries are stable, everything works on time, you probably don't need any visibility. It's going to show up as planned. What's the benefit of spending all this money on visibility? But if there is variability and there are unforeseen delays and you got to take contingent actions, etc., then more and more visibility might help. So we've been trying to understand the different technologies and the kind of data. I know that I took down, Steve told me a little example of a company that they use, which gives them visibility. So I've written down the name of the company to try to follow up. And I think this is where, from an academic sense, we get to see how you might leverage data, okay? So I always tell, I tell my students that actually, frankly, I really don't care about technology unless it gives value, right? So I'm not enamored just because some fancy software or there's a device, et cetera. From my perspective, it's irrelevant. You just paid the hardware provider. The value comes in when it's leveraged to either decrease costs, increase deliveries, improve service level, something of that sort. And so that's something we're. So there's a large group of students from a variety of disciplines, both master's students in industrial engineering, students in business analytics, MBA students. Some of our other projects even have our master's in accounting students, and that's the way this project is unfolding. So we're looking, this project is going to start accelerating because there are lots of deadlines that are coming up soon. And but this is one example of a wonderful opportunity. A second opportunity showed up because we have an alumnus in this company called Advocate Healthcare. Now, if you are from Illinois, Advocate is about 40% of the healthcare market in Illinois. So they control a large number of hospitals. I think it was like 35 to 40 hospitals. And they've been purchasing all these hospitals and trying to streamline them. And we got to this point because one of our alumni was a vice president on the supply chain side. And his question when he came was, he said, why aren't you in the operations area and the global supply chain area, why aren't you focused on healthcare? And we said, so what about healthcare should we focus on? I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you a small amount of funds. Why don't you have our students start visiting our hospitals and mapping the value stream? How goods are received, the volumes received, the inventory systems being used, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things we learned, which I guess many people should have known, is that when a company starts acquiring many separate hospitals, they don't immediately shift to start operating what the acquirer told them to do. They still have their existing systems. So even though there was this myth that this is how everything is operating, nobody was operating that way. So one of the things our students did is they just mapped the processes in all these different hospitals. I think they did 10 or 15 of them. And when they mapped these things, they started noticing that everybody was a one-off and different. So which basically meant if you were in this mythical world where everybody is following this rule and you were sitting and generating graphs, those were meaningless because now they were not following a common metric. So what we started off doing was just benchmarking these procurement processes. And one of the tools of simulation that we found, which is an open source tool, is something called JamSim. And JamSim is an extremely light simulation system. Light just means it doesn't take much memory space. And plus, it's a free piece of software. So many of our students have been using that to try to simulate this operation. And simulate this operation, if you say, what's the point in simulating it? Well, by simulating it, you can get a visual feel for how the system operates now, how the system operates if it's operated differently. So you can get, and by the way, you can speed it up. So you can do a month in a few minutes if you want, depending on how fast you speed it up. So simulation is a way to give a visual feedback into how things would unfold. And along with these simulations, you can build various dashboards of performance. So that's something that the students have been doing in terms of understanding the system. What's great about this is that soon after we started down this project, and this is something that we often realize, we often get invited to do project A, and then after you do a little bit of it, somebody says, well, that's really not our real project. So let me tell you this other thing that's more interesting. And over time, as they get you know better, they'll tell you the real project that they want solved. So for example, and this was something I was discussing in our exec program yesterday, and that is that if you think about what is the real problem in healthcare, it actually isn't this thing. The real problem in healthcare is that they say, we have all these cardiac surgeons and these orthopedic surgeons and everything, and each surgeon uses the kit and tools based on where they have been trained. So now there is not much standardization between all these surgeons. And so how many SKUs do we have to carry? Everybody's SKUs put together. So what would they love to do? They would love to have everybody sit down and say, aren't these things interchangeable? Couldn't you use this instead of that? And it actually turns out it's not an easy conversation. And the reason is because surgeons, I guess like full professors, have big egos, okay? And nobody has told them no, okay? Tom was department head, he knows. You don't tell people no. So in these organizations, nobody has told these surgeons no, and they are top of the pecking order, right? Yet, their choices have very large costs. So one of the things they want to do is, and I think various hospital systems are trying to come up with a mechanism whereby surgeons by area get together. And remember, medicine is a field that is very evidence-based. So they're trying to tell them, hey, take the data regarding evidence-based output of the choices you made and use that to convince each other that really there's not much difference. And if instead of giving a 25% volume to 4 providers, if we can all agree on one provider who's providing an equivalent service, and we get the 100% of the spend, you can drive down the cost dramatically. That's easier said than done. And if you can repeat it with orthopedic surgeons and cardiac surgeons and everybody else, the spend reduction is an order of magnitude greater than reducing the amount of Tylenol you have. Okay? The reducing amount of Tylenol is too small an impact. All of that other equipment is big. So we're gingerly hoping, and so part of what they said is, look, we can't talk to them. Can we stick all of you in front of them, and you deal with them? And the notion is, hey, the good thing about having a professor and students is that you can say, well, I really don't know how this works, but here's an idea, okay? And can you please tell me why this wouldn't work? So they can, frankly speaking, they're a lot more tolerant of people who come in saying we're ignorant. But notice that can create a dialogue that can potentially have an impact. Now, why is this important? Many of you know that hospital systems in the United States are under a tremendous amount of stress. Okay? So you may not realize it now because you're buffered because of all your insurance, et cetera, but there's a tremendous amount of stress, and the stress is in the days of accounts receivable. Okay? Guess who pays those bills? State governments and federal governments, and last time I checked, they're not in an interest, they're not particularly eager to pay hospitals. So these things are creating a tremendous amount of stress. We're hoping, so here is the idea, if it happens. So in this, Jim Churchman was a speaker last year here, and one of the things that Advocate does, which is sort of a very interesting idea, is they think of all savings as nurse equivalents. Okay? And so what that means is the following. The people who can help you identify all of this inventory and the savings are your nurses. But they have no time whatsoever because they're extremely busy. What are they busy doing? If you really record the expenditure of their time, about half of their time is doing what in the rest of supply chain we would call material handling. They're finding inventory, they're carrying inventory, they're doing all of those things. That's what they're doing. So one question is, could we make this like a more traditional manufacturing operation where the moment there is a patient, there's a material handling system that delivers a kit with everything the patient needs, and the nurse practitioner and the doctors can focus on patient care. Right now, nurse practitioners are spending about half of their time doing material handling, and we want them to be spending 5% of the time material handling. Now, going from what they're doing now to the 5% is a long haul, and so one of the things that Advocate does is it counts. If you did this, how many more nurses could we hire? And so nurses, remember, are always believe that they're short-staffed. So if they take steps to identify 10 nurse equivalents, then perhaps they'll get 5. And that's the way that they can collect data. So there are very interesting things that we're learning here. And I'm hoping that as it goes along, we'll be generating cases and material related to it. A third example comes from INDOT projects. Where's Pam? Is Pam anywhere here? There. Okay. Hi, Pam. So I'm going to talk about a couple of projects. Pam's representing INDOT, and so maybe I'll talk about that project first. So I'm going to switch to talk about this project. This came about thanks to help from Pam. And so the idea here is INDOT is the Indiana Department of Transportation. And many of us, when you think about autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, etc., the word association, everybody will be thinking Tesla, right? But remember, this is real. This will happen. The question is the timing of when it'll happen. So Indiana Department of Transportation and through Pam Fisher basically said, well, how can we as a state understand the economic impact of the introduction of autonomous vehicles? So that's the question. And by the way, these are autonomous commercial vehicles. So we're not talking about necessarily replacing your car with a driverless car. We're talking about a truck being replaced by a driverless truck. Okay? Now, the moment you think about that, you're probably already getting a little apprehensive that there's a driverless truck pulling up behind you. So one of the questions to think about is, well, so how might this manifest itself and what is the value? So this is a theoretical projection. When it'll actually happen, I don't know. But the opportunity from autonomous vehicles actually come in many dimensions. One dimension is that if you have an autonomous truck that is being steered, it actually turns out that it needs a much shorter lane. It doesn't need 12 to 15 feet. It can be more of the order of 9 feet. Okay? Now, technically, if you adjust things right, it's quite possible to take a 2-lane road and convert it to a 3-lane road in which one of the lanes is narrow and accommodates the autonomous vehicles, and the other 2 lanes accommodate what's called the traditional vehicles, which is what we are driving, right? Now, so that's on the infrastructure side, and that could be a very big deal. Imagine that through software and all this control and a dedicated lane, we got 3 lanes. We passengers are on 2 lanes. The 3rd lane is all the autonomous vehicles and platooning, and this would be a great thing to happen. But a related question, which I think is the part where we think there's some wonderful opportunity, and we thank Pam for helping us get this opportunity to think about this, is that, now that INDOT is building all these roads, can they embed sensors? Can they embed data collection sources? And can they think of an open source platform to share that information to enable services to be built on that? So what might those services be? At lunch, we were talking about this notion that perhaps you could have autonomous vehicles do the long-haul movement, and this autonomous truck pulls off at an exit, and then there is a fleet of drivers sitting at the exit that pick up the container and make the local delivery. Because autonomous things in local roads are a little complicated. Autonomous things in long-haul roads would be, a lot easier to manage. So that's one point. But you can also think about a whole bunch of software companies that collect that data, people who do proactive maintenance. You can think about lots of related pieces of information. And the question is, how might we generate an ecosystem to get this to happen? So we're at the early stages of this project. We're working with Pam to do some surveys on collecting data regarding people's level of interest, et cetera. This is sort of, again, on the technology side, something we're doing. Another little project, which I'll be brief with this, is the big thing right now, if you've been keeping track of the discussions regarding infrastructure spend in Washington, D.C., the federal government is planning to spend $200 billion in return for $1.5 trillion of private investment. So I don't know about you, I haven't found anybody who takes 200 of my dollars and gives me $1,500 or whatever the multiplier is, maybe 15,000. But how does that come about? That comes about through what's called a P3, a public-private partnership. Our current president, Mitch Daniels, was the governor when this project was done, which is called the Ohio River Bridges Project. And just to make it confusing enough, the Ohio River Bridge is really between Indiana and Kentucky. Okay, why that is, I don't know, but that's the project. So what's interesting is that this was a project that luckily all the people who negotiated the details are now here at Purdue in various staff positions. And so we've been working with INDOT to basically take all of the contractual details. This project, by the way, involved build the bridge and operate it for 35 years. You'll be paid a fee every year to operate the bridge. You'll be charged penalties every time a lane is closed or anything is shut down or if the quality of the roads are bad. And the question is, there were a bunch of terms in the contract. How did it work out, et cetera. This has been interesting. This has involved some of our students in our Master's in Accounting program. Some of the few other things which are, again, offbeat and interesting is, so we have another project. I have a Department of Energy project from the Critical Materials Institute. And one of the reasons this is interesting from a supply chain perspective is you all know that the CAFE standard in 2025, which is a fleet per gallon standard, is 54.5 miles per gallon. Most fleets right now are at 33. So how do you go from 33 to 54.5? The projected pace of innovation will get you to 44. So there's a 12 missing there. Okay? So there are some new technologies. So we've been working with Oak Ridge National Labs. They've introduced a new technology called an aluminum cerium alloy. And the difficulty with incorporation of this alloy is the reverse loop. Unless you can do the reverse loop, the aluminum costs make it prohibitive. So you do need a reverse loop. And in the reverse loop, there's cross-contamination between this cerium and the rest of the system. So some of the things we're trying to do is to understand these things. So what I'm hoping you got is a quick summary of a variety of things. The first thing to note is that we're very eager to be engaged in projects. And I tell executive students that it helps to have a little intellectual arrogance, which basically means, give me any problem, we'll find a way to start looking at it. Okay, you need a little bit of that. Okay, so we're just finding many ways to say yes. The second is, it's possible, and there are many different funding mechanisms to help you get started. So don't wait to hire a high-powered McKinsey consultant. There are a lot of good people here, good students, faculty, et cetera, to get the ball rolling. And finally, from our perspective, there are a number of metrics of performance that our dean looks at. And one of the things he says, okay, first pay the bills, because it's important that there is no cost to the school for the existence of everything we do, which we do. The second is, are you doing something that you'll be proud of from a research perspective? Are we doing something to help students learn? And along the way, are we generating cases, et cetera? So that's our focus.